the internet is bigger than you can imagine, even when you think about how big the internet can possibly be. And so you think, oh, I have this niche. I'm going to do, Substack for Rolex collectors. And you're like, oh, what's the TAM there? 1,000? It's like, no, it's 50,000, right? And I think everything is like 10 or 50x more than you think, which leads to so much opportunity. I think we're in the first inning of, let's call it maybe a CMO, multiple CMOs thinking, oh, wow, I can build $100 million businesses off the backs of my brand. I think they're too focused on, building businesses. So we're in the first inning there of people leaving their jobs and going full-time on content.
Welcome to Media Empires, where we sit down with the most influential media creators right now to learn exactly how they built their empires. Our aim is to extract the secrets of top-tier podcasters, newsletter authors, and media creators who are breaking the old rules for media success. Whether you're looking to start your own empire or simply curious about the nuts and bolts behind media businesses, you'll find valuable insights and tactics in each episode. Grab your headphones, let's dive in. Riverside is a presenting sponsor of Media Empires. It's an essential part of our tech stack. Riverside makes scaling a media business possible for us and so many podcasters and creators. It's our online recording studio, not just for the show, but across the entire podcast network. Riverside lets us record interviews with the best guests from wherever they are in the world. Our team can also cut short-form clips directly from Riverside, because as any listener of this show knows, you create once and then publish everywhere. Sign up for Riverside.fm today by following the link in the description box and use our code MediaEmpires to get a 20% discount. Austin Rief is the CEO of Morning Brew, a media company that covers business news with a unique blend of wit and insight. Morning Brew is a $70 million and growing business that encompasses newsletters, podcasts, brands, and products. During our conversation, Austin shares his perspective on the future of the media business, the critical elements that determine success, including talent and monetization, and where he sees the single biggest opportunity to build a media empire. Austin, thanks for coming on Media Empires podcast. Excited to chat with you.
Yeah, happy to chat.
Awesome. So, Austin, your Morning Brew story has been told in lots of different podcasts. So I kind of want to start in the middle a little bit, or tell some stories that perhaps haven't been as widely told. I'm curious, as you think about the evolution of Morning Brew, what were kind of the different forks in the road, or kind of different like phases where you made a decision to expand it this way, different verticals, for example, or evolve in this way, courses and other business lines where you could have perhaps made a different decision. I'm curious, what were the kind of those evolutions or forks in the road?
Yeah, so I think there were a bunch of inflection points, right? A bunch of decisions. So you can start at the beginning, or towards the beginning, when we decided to go more general. I think it's a theme of Morning Brew is at the time, when 2018 or so, when we hit 1 million subscribers, we had this idea, do we go down funnel and build a verticalized media company that stands for finance, or do we stand for more general business news? And we opted to stand for more general business news. Now, we do create content in retail, marketing, HR, all these verticals, but we didn't build a business that has 7 or 8 different revenue streams, all targeting, let's call it people who work on Wall Street. So I think that was one big one. And then along the way, every time we decide to continue to grow, decide to launch something new, is another inflection point of do we aim for growth or profitability, whether it's expanding into multimedia or trying to build direct-to-consumer revenue. These are all inflection points in the business and trying to grow a little bit more, take it up a notch, diversify revenue a bit.
What are things you decided not to do of like, hey, that's just either too hard or outside of our competent area, or we just don't think it makes business sense, even though other people are suggesting, hey, maybe we should explore it?
Yeah, I mean, the early days, 2017, the recommendation we got was, pivot to video, launch video. It was all about video on Facebook, right? And at the time, we started a newsletter because we didn't know a single thing about video. Like, we couldn't have made videos, right? Even the idea that, you just like pop up your camera and do this. This wasn't nearly as accessible in 2017. And that was a big thing. We're like, we're just going to focus on the newsletter business. It's something we know. Like, we're not exactly sure. We're not going to go raise $10 million, try to compete with BuzzFeed or Vice or anyone like that.
One thing you've talked about is being really excited about just niches and just like, owning a niche, especially, B2B niche or a high consumer, a consumer niche with high consumer spend, serving rich people effectively. That said, you picked a psychographic profile. I'm curious, do you think other companies should also consider picking psychographic profiles, or are they all kind of picked over? Let's talk about, we're starting a media company in 2023, Morning Brew already exists, et cetera. Like, how would you think about that trade-off?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think a lot of what I say now is very counter intuitive or counteracts or is not what we did for Morning Brew. And I think that's always the challenge with startups in general, trying to copy that companies are successful, right? Starting in 2017, I thought we showed that you can go general, right? The Skim showed that you could target women. We showed that you could target business interested people. But those large swaths have been taken up by the Morning Brews and the Skims of the world. But then also the number of people, the long tail of people who are creating content for specific niches has increased so much that now I think that to try to compete with a Morning Brew at scale is really, really hard. And what the internet has shown and what these platforms have shown more than anything is that the internet is bigger than you can imagine, even when you think about how big the internet can possibly be. And so you think, oh, I have this niche. I'm going to do, Substack for Rolex collectors. And you're like, oh, what's the TAM there? 1,000? It's like, no, it's 50,000, right? And I think everything is like 10 or 50x more than you think, which leads to so much opportunity.
Totally. So if we're talking to, ambitious media media entrepreneurs who want to start a media company in 2023, are your options either like go super deep on a niche, crush that niche across multiple platforms, and you'd be surprised at how big that sort of opportunity could be, like the Kevin Rose luxury watch company, I think that's doing like 100 million in revenue or something, or is it an option is to like try to aggregate niches like what Industry Dive did, what Workweek is trying to do? Like, does it feel like those are the two options, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, to me, I mean, both those companies are quite successful. I know, Industry Dive sold for $500 million. To me, the first is really where the opportunity is, because starting a business today, and it really depends. Do you want this to be a lifestyle business where you can make a couple $100,000 a year, or do you want it to be a $50 million revenue business? But if you want the former, you're really going to have to diversify, not away from ads or not away from subscription, but in addition to, right? A watch marketplace, for example. And if that's the case, you have to pick a niche and become known as the go-to expert in that niche. And I think in that respect, we are in the first inning, because there are so many CFOs, CROs, CEOs who I think they think the opportunity in content, or a content-led business, not only content, but content-led business, is quantified in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And I actually get done right, it can lead to 9, 10-figure outcomes. Again, not the newsletter itself, but what it can lead to. And so I think we're in the first inning of, let's call it maybe a CMO, multiple CMOs thinking, oh, wow, I can build $100 million businesses off the backs of my brand. I think they're too focused on, building businesses. So we're in the first inning there of people leaving their jobs and going full-time on content.
Give more examples that you give the watch marketplace as one, but like what are more, let's further paint the picture of like what this could look like, such that like in terms of kind of filling the gaps of what people are missing on how big these businesses could be.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's obviously the big examples, right? There's Mr. Beast and Feastables, Logan Paul and Prime, right? These are billion-dollar companies already, in my guess, right? I don't know, I haven't seen the numbers. Those are big scale plays, right? But then there's so many niches, right? Right? There's people doing it in fitness. There's cosmetics. I met a guy who has a YouTube channel for woodworking. And he has like an 8-figure business for woodworking. And so there's so many opportunities in all these niches. And I think the important thing is you have to pick, as you mentioned, you have to pick a niche that either you're putting company cards down, so it's real estate or finance or investing or marketing, or it's something that people have high disposable income, or they spend a high percent of their disposable income on it. So hunting, fishing, right? These people are spending so much money on this, race car driving. People spend so much money on these, and there's so many opportunities there. One other is there's someone, I blank on his name, but he started Flying Mag, and it's a magazine all about flying. And then I'm pretty sure the way he monetizes is he owns and then sells homes by landing strips. Like I think he bought like a community, I think, and he's in a real estate play where he's selling real estate. You can watch, planes land and see different planes and like stuff like that, like really unique ways to monetize things, I think are really, really cool. And I think you're going to see so much more of this.
Totally. That's really exciting to see. You went on Greg Eisenberg's podcast recently and you said that you're so excited about this niche opportunity that you're interested in potentially, funding or even co-founding kind of opportunities in this space. Like, what types of things you'd be potentially interested in getting involved in, or that you just want to see happen?
What I want to see over the next 5 to 10 years is any true expert, right? Whether you're an expert because you've worked in the industry for 10 years, whether because you've been a watch collector, a pilot, come in and build a brand on Twitter, on LinkedIn, in a newsletter, and really have propensity for call to action. I think there are a lot of people out there who, hack their way to 100,000 subscribers via Twitter threads, but I don't think they're really gonna, sell you anything. Their audience doesn't really love the content they create. But I'm talking about true experts, and I think the opportunity over time is to build a really lean, high margin business, and just build a brand, be the go-to person for flying or for it's the same idea of really owning a space. The reason why it's so hard is because most startups, you can kind of hack your way there, right? You can say, hey, I'm going to learn about the ride sharing business and I'm going to, build Uber. And obviously that wasn't easy, right? But you don't have to, Travis didn't have to be a taxi driver, right? And in fact, it was probably a benefit, right, of him to not be, or own a taxi cab company, right? Airbnb guys, famously, obviously, people stay on their couches, but they didn't work at Marriott. But for this idea, you actually have had to put in the 5, 10, 15, 20 years to become an expert. And that's what's so hard is the people who want to do it don't have the expertise, don't have the experience, haven't spent the time. And that's kind of the interesting part here is it kind of breaks some of the narratives of Silicon Valley and VC investing.
Yeah. Breaks it how so?
In the sense of, again, in Silicon Valley, it's often said that you don't want to disrupt an industry from within, right? You don't want to have worked at Marriott and then disrupt it. You want to have an outsider's perspective because you can view things differently and you don't view these artificial or potentially artificial walls as barriers. You're just like, oh, well, why? You ask why? Like, why is that the case, right? But let's say, for example, someone was going to start was going to build a brand all around copywriting, right? You want someone who's really, really good at copywriting, has spent years doing that. And so in that regard, they don't have to be an industry expert, but they have to be really good at copywriting.
Yeah. Make expertise great again.
Exactly.
So thought experiment. Let's say, Morning Brew was flourishing, but you were no longer there. And you still have the same expertise and resources that you have now. And let's say you were ambitious to build another media company. Why not create it? Would you create like an agency or like a private equity model, or like what is the business where you take all these experts and you get the benefits from scale? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting idea. I haven't exactly come across what it would look like, but I think totally, right? I have an idea, if I wasn't at Morning Brew, would I do this for building media companies, right? Would I create a media company about building media companies, right? And like it's a little,
meta.
It's a little like meta, yeah, exactly. And would I consult and help all these people start their companies? And again, the question is, how would I monetize, right? Because I wouldn't want to monetize a consultancy fee.
You'd probably take some upside, right? You'd co-found it with them effectively.
Exactly. Or, what's interesting is, and I'll give him a shout out. There's a guy named Tyler Denk who worked at Morning Brew, was our first like everything besides writer, our first product manager, first growth marketer. And he started a company called Beehive, right? It's a competitor to the Substacks, the reviews. But what's interesting is at the time we couldn't launch that within Morning Brew. But what's interesting is, and I would never do this because Tyler's built a great company, but if I went out and did that, right, that's exactly in this model of me building this verticalized media company. And the question is, how do you aggregate across many? How do you partner with them? Are you buying? Are you building? I think it can be done in a number of different ways. I just think you need the right people, and you need to, most importantly, be able to add enough value to a creator to get them to work with you.
Yes, and that is a high bar. And so sticking in the aggregation theme, let's talk about Industry Dive. Like if Industry Dive started in 2023, what would it look like, and would it be successful? Is there an opportunity to build kind of like a aggregator of trade content niches, or how do you think about that?
Well, I don't know if you could start it from scratch. I mean, I guess you technically could, right? But it's really hard. I think what Industry Dive did is they took these trade publications that were written and brought them online and made them look much better and made the content more internet friendly, internet native. But I think now it would be tough to replicate that model. Like there's just so many more companies. But I do think there's a big, and this has been spoken about a ton in the media industry, but there's probably a B2B roll-up of sorts, right? Where there are all these niche publications that are doing 2, 3, 4, $10 million of revenue. They have a conference business, they have a subscription, they have an ad business. And can you buy all of these, the real estate pubs and the marketing pubs and scale technology across all of them, scale ad sales across all of them? What are the synergies and build something really big? And I think the like kicker there would be if you can build a data product on top of all of that and sell data into these companies, that's where it becomes really, really interesting, right? That's where you can build something where it truly is venture backable, right? In the tens of billions. And it's what like Freight Waves is trying to do in the freight industry. If you can do that across 10 or 15, it gets really interesting.
Yeah. It's and say more about what the data business would look like and how you'd get like economies of scale across these categories. Like what's really important there?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on the data business, right? But what a media company does is it gives you access to a lot of people on a frequent basis, right? And so you can either collect data from them, right? Interview these people, or you can give them data and do like a data sharing service, for example. So, you're in the, I don't know, the watch business, right? Like, you can plug into like your business, for example, and I can see anonymously, of course, almost like a similar web, right? I can see what you guys are selling and for what price, and in exchange for that, you get data from other people, and you're selling into that. I'm not a data product expert, but there's something there around owning the audience to the entire industry. You have access to everyone. They trust you. They trust you more than any other publication.
Makes sense. A lot of opportunity there. Let's look at Workweek as another example. And there's a specific company, but I'm also just curious at the broader model that they're doing. What do you think is exciting about model, and what do you think is like a risk of that model? And of course, you guys are have your own flavor on it.
Yeah, I think B2B is always interesting. That's like my thing is I think consumers are hard. Consumer brands are hard. They're here today, gone tomorrow. So I really do like what Workweek's doing in the sense that they're going B2B and they're using talent, right? And I think talent first is the way to go. And so they have a flavor of what I'm talking about. I think it's a really interesting business model. I think they saw what Industry Dive did, and they said, okay, how do we make the Industry Dive for 2022 or 2023? And this is the business they came up with. And I think it is a good idea. It's a really interesting concept. And so I like that. Look, I mean, the challenge is always working with individuals is hard, right? What's the expression? Mickey Mouse doesn't get a DUI, right? When you work with, when you're Disney, why is this such a great business? Mickey Mouse doesn't die, and Mickey Mouse can't go to jail, or whatever it may be. So that's pretty nice, right? So that's always the challenge, is dealing with people. How do you deal with people? How do you retain them? How do you keep them motivated? How do you add enough value to them where they stay excited and like you? These are all the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and they're going to deal with too. And if they can execute well, it's an execution game. There's no technology risk. It's all execution risk.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. The Industry Dive takes this kind of like, everyone, I don't mean, I say this in a positive way, or I don't mean to say in a negative way, but everyone's replaceable, and like it's all about the brand and less about the individual creator. Whereas Workweek, I think I don't say exact opposite, but they're much more creator, focused. And Workweek is kind of the white label in the back, brand in the back, empowering it. You guys, I think, explore both models or do some hybrid in some ways. How do you think about like the pros and cons of those models, or what do you think makes most sense?
You're saying between creator and the brand?
Yeah, like unified brand.
I mean, so I think every business is different, right? But for us, we think the balance is to do both, to build a really great brand and leverage the brand. You don't want to hide the brand, right? You want the brand to, especially in an ad-based business where you're trying to work with big, financial institutions or big consumer brands, they want to trust your brand. So you need to have the Morning Brew brand, or we believe we need to put that front and center. But we also believe that people follow people. People follow individuals, and it's the classic, individual over institution mindset. And so we think the correct thing to do is to bring them together. There are a ton of companies who are successful not doing that. Industry Dive, of course, is one. The Economist is another, has really succeeded with that. So it's not impossible to succeed either way, but I think knowing why you're doing what you're doing is what's important.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm up to in a way that helps kind of put some of these questions in context. And also, it's a bit of I'm going to ask for a live advice session.
All right.
Basically, I'm incubating a media company in the tech space. But my vision is basically podcasts and newsletters for every category. Some of it's going to be partnered with VCs who are just like too busy to do this on their own. But hey, they just show up, or founders. But they have good distribution and they make good content, and then I'll take care of everything else. And some of it is going to be actually finding the Lenny when he's at Airbnb and has an inkling that he wants to write a newsletter. What advice or even follow-up questions to better understand, might you have, or reactions?
Yeah, my question would be why would someone partner with you, right? What are you providing for them such that they should partner with you? That's always the biggest thing. Is like everyone wants to build a network, and they're valuable if you can build them. But why is someone going to work with you? And then why, when they become successful, are they going to stay? And why are they not going to just leave? As long as you have the right infrastructure, the right contract length, the right setup, if you bring in a Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman, right, or any of these people, right, into your ecosystem, and yes, it's going to suck when they leave, but if they haven't acted as a rising tide that lifts all boats for what you've built, then you really don't have the right infrastructure in place, right? And so your goal should be to retain them as long as possible. They may leave, or maybe you renegotiate where they get the vast majority of the upside. But that's also going to be very dependent on what are the shared services you provide for them. Are you selling their ads? Are you helping them grow? Are you editing their content? Are you sourcing guests? All of that stuff will go into their calculus on if they leave or if they stay.
Fascinating. How do you think about different formats? Like I know Industry Dive is just like, newsletters / like publications. Like, are podcast networks on their own that valuable, or how should I think about the business value of podcasts versus newsletters versus like newsletters plus new, or whatever Industry Dive does, like combination of?
Yeah, so one insight that I think is really important for anyone starting thinking about a network is that like mediums grow like mediums, right? So podcasts grow other podcasts, newsletters grow newsletters, YouTube grows YouTube, but growing across is very hard. It is, I mean, you'll see growing from Twitter to podcast, like you might think or newsletter to podcast even, right? We expected our conversion rate on listeners to podcast downloads, even to give it one try, would be super high. And it wasn't that high, right? Because it might be the same psychographic of person, but they have different consumption habits. And oftentimes the person wants to read a 7 times a week newsletter doesn't want to listen to a once a week 45-minute interview podcast. And so having the network of one medium and dominating a medium and then expanding is super powerful.
Let's say you dominated the podcast. Like, how should I think about monetization on or just how you guys think about monetization on podcast networks?
For us, it's host read ads, right? So it's an ad-based model. And then we've built or we've been working towards a direct to consumer business as well. So for example, we've a really successful creator on our platform. Her name's Katie Gaddy. Her podcast is The Money with Katie Show. 40 to 50,000 downloads per episode. Her Instagram's 150 some thousand. Her newsletter's 100 some thousand. Every year she launches a wealth planner, which is updated every year, and you put your income in and everything, and it spits out all this information about your wealth, helps you track your net worth. I mean, it's 6-figure product, right? And it's very high margin. And so we look to monetize in 2 different ways. I think ads are, some people are very dismissive of ads. I think that's a mistake. I think ads are an important piece, but just a single piece of a puzzle. It's not the full puzzle.
Talk about the trade-off between subscription and ads, or how modern media companies, like, is it yes and just like often or always do both, or how do you recommend I think about it?
Yeah, so it's yes and, right? I think ads are really helpful to get things off the ground, and so you don't burn money, right? It's a good way for most businesses to really fuel growth. It's not a great business if you're trying to build, again, a multi-billion-dollar business in terms of like, having true equity value. Ads are a very tough business there. It's very fickle.
Yeah. If you were dead set on building like a media company in the tech space, there hasn't been a ton of innovation outside of the Lenny's and the Packies that we talked about. There was the information a few years ago, but that's kind of like a, more of like a Wall Street Journal, like news, scoops, proper business. How would you think about like what is the opportunity, or what is the white space in tech media?
I guess do you consider Lenny tech media? I don't know if I would, right? Like I think it's all about definitions, right? And it gets a little tough. But if you think the idea is operators helping people who work in tech not become more informed about the industry, but to become better at their jobs, the opportunity is endless, right? The opportunity to help people get better at their job is endless. There's endless niches, endless opportunity. The opportunity to tell better tech stories, to me, that's not nearly as exciting if you're trying to build a big business.
Yeah. No, I'm focused on the get better at their job. It's the working name for the company is called Turpentine, after the quote by Picasso. When art critics get together, they talk about form and meaning, and when artists get together, they talk about where to buy cheap turpentine. So it's meant to be like practitioners talking to each other, kind of insider, like on just how to get better.
That's a great quote. I love that name.
Yeah. Thank you. And so when you say is endless opportunity, what you mean is just say go by position by position, and everyone's in some like career path. If they have a sense for how to get better in that career path, there's big opportunity there.
Totally. I think yes. I think the question though is how big are those opportunities, right? And I think that's going to be your biggest challenge. Is if they're $3 million opportunities, to sell ads in these niches is not easy, right? And it's tough to sell across, right? How many companies want to buy ads for project managers and for marketers and for people working in healthcare and people working in IT? And that's always what's tough about going going into horizontally across verticals. Scaling an ads team is going to be tough.
Yeah. And is the reason why you guys pick the categories you pick because there is some adjacency to each other, or because you already have an edge there?
Yeah, so it's a variety of factors, right? We look at everything. We look at one, is there enough news to tell, right? We're in the news business, so is there enough stories to tell, right? That's really important because we want to send 3 to 5 newsletters a week per vertical. The second is there enough overlap between the people, that like the marketing industry and our reader base? That's our big advantage over someone like an Industry Dive is we start day one and have 50 or 100,000 subscribers. It's very unfair when your verticals are profitable day one because you have a list.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so when you think about how to work with creators, let's say you're advising me on, I identify these future Lennys, and first I focus on what the value prop is, et cetera. Do you have a sense for like what are the economic arrangements that best set up for long-term success? Like, should I be trying to hire? Should I be trying to fund? I know some of it is case by case, or a lot of it, and depends what they care about too. But do you have an instinct on what even medium term win-win relationships could look like?
Yeah, the funding thing is interesting to me, right? Now coming to terms on evaluation is going to be really tough. I think a lot of the way these networks work is you try to partner with big names as almost like marketing, and to expedite distribution, and then you try to bring in people who you think you found ahead of the curve, people who you think can build a big brand, who can become somebody, but they're not right now, and you pay them a salary, and then you kind of, that's where you can really make your arbitrage, right? Is finding hidden gems, right? If you brought Lenny onto your platform, how much arbitrage are you going to find there, right? He knows what he's worth, and he's not going to sell or whatever for less than that. So you're not going to find much arbitrage there. Versus if you found the next Lenny, right? Maybe someone who's more talented than Lenny, a better writer, but no one knows who they are, and they actually haven't even started yet, right? They're still working at Airbnb. That's where the arbitrage opportunity is in my mind.
Yeah, totally. And so let's say, I found the Lenny for, 5 or 10 different categories where we're off the races. There's a podcast, there's a newsletter. Then there's kind of like additional business. There's like recruiting, or there's events, or there's other products that you mentioned. The planner was one example. Like, or what have you learned about kind of the different, courses, like different business opportunities, and which ones make more sense to go into relative to each other?
And so I think the number one thing we've learned is it's really hard to do a bunch of things at the same time. And so I don't think any are better than others, right? necessarily, right? It's all about who the audience is, what the product is, what your level of investment is. But doing multiple things, having multiple sources of revenue and working on those simultaneously, that's really hard. And so I would recommend you maybe start with ads and then do events and then do courses, but over the course of years. So 2024 is our year of events, 2025 is our year of courses. And what that thinking makes you do is it makes you ruthlessly prioritize. If you only do one new thing each year, that's very different. They say, hey, we're going to test everything, and testing everything is really hard. And you need to have an A+ team to say, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to try 7 monetization, revenue streams day one. It's really, really challenging.
Hard to do all at once for sure. Let's give more advice to the creator. Let's say, someone is listening to this. They have, the 15 to 20 years of experience doing something, owning some niche. Maybe like, they're an accountant or they're in real estate or they, been in the insurtech space, and they want to be creator. And they're wondering what platform makes the most, like they could write newsletters, they could start a podcast, they could, be a YouTuber, they could do other things, Instagram, et cetera. How should they, TikTok, how should they evaluate like which format might make most sense?
Yeah, I think it depends what they're good at, right? If they're good on camera, I think YouTube's a great platform. Great platform. If they're a good writer, or if they can take a copywriting course and become a good writer, I think the written mediums are great too. I think they're a great place to start, right? Twitter's a great place to build a brand. You can take that content, port it over to LinkedIn pretty easily, push all that to a newsletter. The starting off on Twitter, LinkedIn, pushing to a newsletter, and then go to a podcast, that's a really great path. So is the YouTube path. And I think those, while not mutually exclusive, again, you want to get really good at what you're doing. I think the number one recommendation I give any creator who wants to work on a written platform is go take a copywriting course. Because most of these creators, they're just not good at writing. Like it's very, very hard to be a good writer. And it takes a lot of practice and practicing your craft. But if you can combine being a CRO at a SaaS company and you go and you're an amazing copywriter, that's really compelling. You can build a business off of that.
Totally. Yeah. I highly recommend that course. You guys are the best in business when it comes to copy. I mean, just on that idea, I feel like there are two interesting opportunities here. Just like even for broader agency plays. One is like COO in a box for creators. Identify a talented creator and say, hey, here are the other platforms or businesses you should be doing. And I even had Jack Butcher on the other day, and we were brainstorming all the other things he could be doing, and he's doing a lot already, and he's pretty entrepreneurial. He's like, yeah, I could be doing it, but I'm not, and I don't want to. But if someone else was out there who's really capable and wants to do it with me, like I'd give them a big chunk of it. So kind of COO in a box for creators who recognize that's what they need. But then also there's the kind of like the opposite, where it's people who are good at operators but don't know how to build like an audience, but they have really interesting thoughts and experience, and they would like if they were good at it, they would build a big audience. And so it's almost like creator or audience builder in a box in terms of like, hey, here here's how to write, here's how to do the frameworks, or here like we'll do it for you.
Yeah. So let's start with the second, right? I think the thing that's more commoditized is the operator, the COO. So the second one I think is tough because like to say, hey, just like write great content on accounting. That's, if that was the case and if you could find people to do that, this I don't think we'd have an opportunity here, right? This is a very, maybe over the last 10 years was when the platforms had all the power, right? It was content was commoditized. And I think now we're seeing the rise of, let's call it super creators, where the creators are getting power back. Mr. Beast is more powerful than YouTube in a lot of respects, right? He became the fast growing person on TikTok. And so he can port his audience over, and he's so good, he can really control the platforms in some way. Joe Rogan's worth $100 million or maybe $200 million, right? So I don't know if that works. The first one works, but I don't think you have to figure out the right way to do it, because you have to find the right value exchange, right? Like, what is the right value exchange such that a creator is going to give me a percent of their business, or is it a new business? And what's the business? And how much of your time are you spending? And are you doing it across 10 creators or one? And so I think I've seen a lot of people try to do this like operations in a box, And it will work, and it does work, right? There are people out there who create alcohol brands for celebrities, right? But you have to be really focused. You have to be the best in the world at what you do and partner with great creators, or otherwise the value exchange isn't there. You're not gonna get paid enough such that you're happy, and you're not gonna provide enough value such that the creator's happy.
Just to follow up once more on the first idea to see if there's anything there. I mean, you could imagine someone like Dave Perel, kind of like a couple years ago, when he was kind of newer and he was starting up his course and he was the guy on that. You could have imagined he would go to the Nick Hoobers of the world, like basically all these like all the people selling these commodities and say, hey, I'm going to make you the real estate guy. I'm going to make you this guy, and I because I have this course, I can find people to just like train you on how to do that or do it for you, and you're gonna become like the default known person for this very niche space, and I'm gonna get some upside, or you're gonna pay me handsomely for that. Do you see that or not really?
Maybe I'm skeptical, right? I think the point of view, right? Like I think you discount how much you've learned about either company building or VC over the last 10 years, such that you just think it's obvious, right? Maybe, hopefully, I'm the same way about media. Someone else, Dave Perel, the same way about writing. And so to just have someone write for you, I mean, yes, ghost writing is a thing, but to scale it to something meaningful, I think is hard. It's possible. I just think it's hard.
Yeah, I think you'd have to believe that it was like, you take podcasts or something and turn like you find some way of translating the thinking in a way that's honest to it. And maybe it's audio, but yeah, it's not easy. A lot of things get lost there. How would you advise like growing the media properties once there's like one thing that's working, or is that the wrong framework to be thinking about?
The first thing is I think people too quickly expand to another medium, right? Like I would just keep on, running it till the wheels fall off and just keep on going and make it, the biggest newsletter, the biggest podcast it can be. And then I think you have to really have a reason. So many people of newsletters launch podcasts for the sake of launching a podcast. Like, oh, it's just the next medium, but it's not differentiated. It's not very good. And so I think that's always the question is like, why a podcast? What topic, what content? That's, I think, an important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, don't take it for granted that it'll work. I'm curious about your education business and the courses business, because something that I like my experience in the courses business is that some of it was inflated by just COVID. Like a lot of people had a lot of time on their hands and money, and then also just that teachers wouldn't want to give classes again. Like if they were really good, and so. I'm curious how you're thinking about the course business has evolved and what that means for you guys.
Yeah, I totally agree that cohort-based courses were definitely not a flash in the pan, but they had their moment, and it's much harder now. And so we've taken our education business from one cohort-based course to 3 cohort-based courses to now cohort-based courses are like the middle of the funnel for us, right? We have downloadable things. We have $249 1 day to 1 week sprints. Our cohort-based courses are our 6 to 8 week products. And also we have a B2B offering and we're selling into businesses. And I think that is a big opportunity. I think especially with remote work, companies are looking for ways to incentivize their employees when they can't buy them lunch every day, or they're not buying them, they don't have ping pong tables, and they need culture. And I think we can provide this experience. I do think I mean, if you look at NPS scores and everything else, like the experience we provide is amazing. And I think the challenge is some people are willing to spend $2,000 in that experience, but a company might be willing to spend $1,500 for 100 people or 200 people. So we think B2B is an interesting path there, and we'll see if it works out. But we're excited, and we have a couple clients lined up to beta test it.
That's awesome. When you think about the future of Morning Brew and kind of your vision for it, and obviously you've done a ton to date over the past number of years, but how would you sort of pie chart like what you expect the business or the revenue is going to come from, and how is it different from what it looks like today?
Right now, it's vast majority ads, and it's vast majority newsletter ads, and our goal has always been to continue to grow the absolute dollar of ads, and newsletter ads, but decrease that as a percent of total revenue. And so our goal is to grow our podcast advertising revenue and our video advertising revenue, and then grow our education revenue. And so I hope that advertising is always the biggest part of our business. Otherwise, advertising will have collapsed, or I mean, maybe other businesses will have grown a ton. But our goal is to continue to increase the pie and slowly over time make education 3%, 5%, 7, 10, 12, but make it challenging for that to grow because of how big the ads business is getting.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. When you talk about your vision, like what's the closest thing like that has existed or exists today?
So I think there are businesses doing kind of both, but not doing it together, right? I think Industry Dive reflects something like what we want to do on the B2B side. If you look at what we're doing on the multimedia side of things, there's flavors of complex. There's flavors of even like what HubSpot has been doing with their network, right? There's flavors of Spotify or Wondery, right? So there are all these other orgs out there who are doing bits and pieces, but they're not putting it together the way I think that it can be done. And it's really hard, but I think we can take the best of Industry Dive and the best of here and the best of there and bring it all together and just, build. I mean, essentially, what are we doing? We're trying to build the next Wall Street Journal, just doing it in a different way.
The HubSpot podcast network is really interesting. What do you think is the business case for them, and do you think more companies should do that?
When I first got into media, to me, this verticalized media thing was so obvious, right? Why wouldn't Robinhood buy Morning Brew or Coinbase buy Morning Brew? Why wouldn't HubSpot buy The Hustle? And they did. And so I guess my answer will be kind of contradictory. Yes, they should, but it's so hard. It's so hard to buy a media company, let it run independently, not disrupt it, right? We've seen time and time again, this model that looks so, it's perfect for an M&A pitch deck, right? Like it's a banker's dream, right? I could draw up the deck in 30 seconds. In practice, doing it and keeping the soul of the company and keeping the team, that's what's so hard. And so should more companies do it? Yes, but it's not quite as beautiful as an upside down triangle that you can kind of just briefly draw in an M&A deck.
Totally. And what's exciting about it is you're buying an audience and a brand at kind of an arbitrage, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right? I'll ask you, what do you think the average customer value is, the LTV of a HubSpot customer? Let's say maybe it's measured in the thousands. And so it's like, if HubSpot goes and buys a media company for $10 or $20 million, they only need, a couple hundred customers to break even. And that's the play, right? Is saying you're a high LTV SaaS business and you're going to buy a media company who not only has an audience, but they sell ads, and that business is a volatile business. And so to take a check today as a media company is super attractive. And so, yeah, HubSpot, it seems like, and I don't know too much about it, but in addition to buying The Hustle, they've been partnering with other creators. I mean, they're doing this, right? And the beauty from a creator standpoint is I don't have to work with 1,000 advertisers. I get to promote one. And I think there's something really like nice and beautiful about that.
Totally. Gearing towards closing here, the Morning Brew alumni is a bit of a mafia. You mentioned Tyler earlier, started Beehive. We're talking to the team that's running Smooth, and a number of people there, are doing interesting things post their Morning Brew experience. Talk a little bit about how you thought about it, or how you react to sort of what's happened at Morning Brew for people who've gone and do really interesting stuff afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool that people have learned enough here to be able to go on and start their own thing or be a part of something bigger. I think it's awesome. And so, I like to cheer on everyone who goes and does something. And I think it's a testament just to the culture the company had in the first 7 or 10 people. We were, I don't know, the first 10 people, let's say. The only reason they joined Morning Brew was because they were entrepreneurial, right? And so we basically had 10 CEOs, 10 entrepreneurs, 10 COOs. And everyone saw the company in a different light. Everyone saw a different opportunity. And everyone, is now attacking the opportunity they saw. And I think it's really cool to build this ecosystem around newsletters, media, whether it's the software version like Tyler's doing, or whether it's a consultancy, or whether it's going on and building the next generation of Morning Brews. And I think that's really cool. And I think it shows that you as a company, you've created a lot of value. There's the Peter Thiel thing where it's like you create X value and you capture, how can you capture Y% of X? And I used to think for a while that what we did as a company is we did a really good job of making Y and X very, very similar numbers. But seeing people go off and build other companies makes me feel really good that X is actually much bigger than I originally once thought. And I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah. That's an inspiring note, and it's a great note to end on. Austin, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom here with the podcast and with me. For any upcoming plugs, obviously people should follow you on Twitter and be subscribing to Morning Brew and look out for your courses. What else can people you want to share with people in leaving?
Yeah, just give me a follow on Twitter. Reach out if you have any questions. I'd love to just chat with people. I check my DMs at least once a week, so I'll try to get back to everyone. And Eric, we got to talk about this media company. I didn't know you're doing this. We should chat more.
Yeah, exactly. I eagerly look forward to it. Thanks so much, Austin.
Awesome. Thank you.
Riverside is a presenting sponsor of Media Empires. It's an essential part of our tech stack. Riverside makes scaling a media business possible for us and so many podcasters and creators. It's our online recording studio, not just for the show, but across the entire podcast network. Riverside lets us record interviews with the best guests from wherever they are in the world. Our team can also cut short-form clips directly from Riverside, because as any listener of this show knows, you create once and then publish everywhere. Sign up for Riverside.fm today by following the link in the description box and use our code Media Empires to get a 20% discount.